meeting regarding the new fire district that we're proposing between the consolidation of McMinnville Fire Department and the McMinnville Rural Fire District at $2 per thousand. With me tonight, I have Union President Todd Godfrey and McMinnville Fire Chief Rich Leifert. And between the three of us, we'll give you a brief rundown of what this fire district can do for the citizens of not only McMinnville, but also the rural fire district, and the value that it's going to add to the region. So thank you for coming out tonight, and we're going to keep it brief so we allow more time for questions. So we hope you guys have plenty of questions, and thanks again for coming out.
All right. Hi, I'm Todd Godfrey. Most of my life lived here, so 40-ish years, and 14 years with McMinnville Fire. I have family and friends who have been involved in the fire service, so none of this stuff is new to me. It's why I wanted to be kind of an active role in all this. And I do feel like this is going to better our community and better our service to our community. For those of you that don't know, fire district is nothing new. It's nothing that hasn't been done before. In fact, what's not on the slide is in just Yamhill County, there are 10 agencies that are providing fire service in Yamhill County. Of those, only 3 are still city departments. Everyone else is a district or a tribal fire department. In the recent past that we've been able to find, municipalities that have successfully done this have been Scappoose, St. Helens, Klamath City, Beaverton, Redmond, Newburgh, and Carlton. Ashland's currently underway. Dundee is currently looking at doing something similar as well. So it's definitely not something new. It's something that has been around for a long time, and it has a lot of advantages, which we'll cover tonight. So why do we want a district? Well, one of the big things is that we can elect our own set of officials just to govern the fire district and everything that's operated underneath that. So we wouldn't be a part of the city anymore. We would have our own group of elected by the community, including the rural district and city, and that elected group would set the priorities for that fire district. It would also allow to have just dedicated revenues for that fire agency. So any tax money that is brought into that is just dedicated to that fire agency. It doesn't have to be split up between parks and pools and police and wastewater and all the different agencies that the city currently covers. It also gives us a lot of flexibility in budgeting for revenue uses. It allows us an easier time of carrying cash over from year to year, so we can save up for some of the big ticket items that have been historically difficult for us to save up for in McMinnville. It also gives better opportunity for grants. There's a lot more grants out there for fire agencies solo versus city departments and just different aspects of city themselves. And then one of the big things that you've probably heard about lately has been a lot of the capital projects that need to happen in the city, a lot of deferred maintenance in the city. There isn't competition with that. If we have our own taxing money, if we have our own ability to govern ourselves, then the capital projects are what the priority is for that fire district, not necessarily prioritizing whose roof is worse in the city than this one because we only have X amount of dollars to fix what we can fix that year. And like I kind of covered, it gives the ability to do better long-term planning for the service delivery. We can project out call volumes and where buildings are happening and where we might need to add fire stations and add personnel and just provide a better service delivery.
So what we're hoping for in May of 2023, the voters of the city of McMinnville and the McMinnville Rural Fire Protection District may be asked to consider a proposal to create a new and special district that merges fire and ambulance services. And the reason we're saying maybe at this time is because currently those two districts, the city, the McMinnville Fire Department and the Rural Fire Protection District, are operating under a contract. The city of McMinnville receives contract funds from the Rural Fire Protection District, and the Rural Fire Protection District does not provide fire protection services except through the contract with the city, but they do have administrative costs and oversight. And in 2008, we embarked on a process of trying to identify how we can improve our services to the community, our fire and EMS services that we provide as the city of McMinnville. We incorporated and included the entire county in a process, all of the districts in the county at the startup, as a feasibility study that was conducted by consultants. The consultants identified that the Yamhill County should be evaluating and looking at consolidating districts and departments to improve their services for a variety of reasons, all of those which are the reasons that we'll get into in just a little bit for us. But they identified that it would be the best way to provide fire services and EMS services to the residents for the long-term sustainability, and all the items that Todd just talked about were a reason to do that. Recent budget constraints have caused staff furloughs within the city. Capital and staffing needs have been put on hold due to the lack of tax revenues. We have a fire protection fleet that is aging, that as we have our frontline engine is then in the shop right now looking at about a $30,000 repair. So we're operating out of older vehicles to try and keep our services up and running. We have service gaps within our service system right now that have delayed response times, largely because of the number of call volume that we have with the amount of limited resources that we have. We have insufficient staffing resources for those emergency needs. We have lack of reserves for capital projects, such as substations and vehicle replacements and fleet replacements. So because we are in the tax laws within this state, the changes that occurred in the late 90s, we are locked into the city's taxing structure at this point in time. So this opportunity would give us, this district will give us the opportunity to create our own taxing district with our own base rate and address those issues that Todd talked about. Currently, in October, the City of McMinnville City Council passed a resolution authorizing submission of and support for the petition of the new fire district to the county commissioners. That in itself is a long process. We have just finished our first public hearing last week. We have a second public hearing on December 12th. Given the feedback, the county commissioners will make a decision on placing the district on the ballot for May of 2023. If the county commissioners refer the proposal to the voters, the new district will include what you see on the map. The dark line around the outside of the property line is the existing rural fire protection district boundary. Currently, there's an internal boundary or a donut that wraps around the city of McMinnville inside. The rural fire protection district is the unincorporated area, and the fire protection city of McMinnville is inside. The new district would incorporate both the city and the rural fire protection district, current rural fire protection district. If passed, the proposed measure would ensure that we have trained and local emergency medical staff for every emergency call. Currently, over 700 times a year, we're calling for our partners to come in and assist on ambulance calls, EMS calls. If we have 4 or 5 calls at a time, we have Tualatin Valley in town, we have Sheridan in town, we have the tribal response coming out of Grand Ronde. Sometimes we have private ambulance coming in from the metro area because all of those ambulances are tied up. Currently, we have serious issues with our hospitals. They are on short-staffed and on divert regularly. So what that means is one of our ambulances picks up someone here in McMinnville. If McMinnville's on divert, if Newburgh is on divert, if Dallas is on divert, like it was this morning, all of those hospitals on divert, we're either going to Portland Metro to Salem, or we're trying to find a hospital to take patients to. That takes that ambulance out of our system for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on where we have to take those patients. It will allow our local fire agencies to replace the aging fleet, which I described a little bit earlier, with 3 new engines that are better equipped to respond to emergencies and have less maintenance costs than we're currently incurring. The maintenance costs that we're paying on our fleet, we could get a loan and buy and pay off the new fleet, but we don't have the capacity within the city system currently to affect those types of purchases. If passed, it will allow the new district to hire sufficient fire and medical personnel within 3 years to reduce the response times of initial units up by 90 seconds on fire and medical emergencies, and to provide fully operational fire and medical response in effort to meet the national standards. When sufficient staff and resources arrive in a timely manner, there's a greater ability to reduce injury and death to victims as well as decrease property damage. The faster we get the initial unit there, the faster we can affect a positive impact on the situation, whether it's a fire or an EMS. On fires, the faster we get the additional resources there after the first unit, the faster we can make a larger impact or more of an impact on reducing risk to losing your property and life. It will allow for a new fire inspector position to help identify hazards within the community and prevent fires before they start. And it will allow construction to begin on 2 new substations within 5 years, improving response times to city and rural areas. Substation locations obviously would be identified by the new board, but we have several studies showing and identifying locations on the peripheral of the city limits that would still allow a direct impact to the city, but would also improve service to the rural district areas. So it's an effort to try and improve services to the entire service area, not just the city of McMinnville. If the proposed measure did not pass, and we were not able to move into that realm with the new taxing rate, the district would not be created. The property tax rates for the fire services would remain the same, and current service levels would remain the same. The 2 separate entities would not have the resources to reduce response times. Additional staff would not be able to be added. New response vehicles would likely not be purchased, and additional substations or improvements would not likely be made, given to the limited resources that the city currently has.
All right, so now the fun part. What's it going to cost? So $2 per thousand is the rate that the study came out with. We also looked at $1.80 per thousand. The issue with going with $1.80 per thousand versus $2 is it removes the sustainability, and it takes away a lot of the service levels that you're moving the needle on, like the 2 substations and the amount of staff that you're going to add, as well as replacing some of that aging fleet. So currently, the city levies $5.02 per thousand on the McMinnville resident taxpayer, and of that $5.02, roughly $1.50 of it is used to fund fire service. So your fire service is going to be using another 50 cents to get to that $2, but the elephant in the room is, what is the city going to do with that $1.50? And so we as the council have decided that we don't want to walk away from that $1.50 with the state tax laws that were passed in the early 90s. If we walked away from that, that would be very short-sighted for the long-term sustainability of other city programs. But we also are cognizant of your wallets as a taxpayer of the city of McMinnville, and so we're working on engaging you guys through polling later this month on what to do with that $1.50. We'll get those results back January 18th in a work session with the budget committee, and we'll have opportunity for public comment there. And that's where we're going to have that discussion on what to do with that $1.50 and when to bring it back online, and where you, the citizens, see value in that, and what city programs that is, if that's parks or police or public works, or where do you guys see value in that, is what we want to know as policymakers. And so it's not something I can stand up here today and tell you what that $1.50 is going to go for, when it's going to come back online, or how it's going to come back online. But we're definitely cognizant of the impact that has on you. Next slide will talk about what I basically just talked about, but we're going to land on that decision no later than March 1st. So you guys are going to have roughly 2.5 months to know exactly what that $1.50 is going to go for before you cast your vote. Other districts that Todd pointed out on that slide when we first started this meeting waited till the very last of the conversation to bring up that taxing authority. And we as a city body wanted to address the elephant in the room from the start. Although we don't have all the answers today on that $1.50, we wanted to be transparent about it and make sure that you, the citizens, get to determine what that value is. This talks about the Rural Fire Protection District. Theirs is a little bit more cut and dry. They have one tax rate right now established at the same time that 502 was for the city. they got established at 97 cents per thousand. So that rural voter is going to go to $2 per thousand, but they don't have to worry about any of that $1.50. Their cost today is their cost tomorrow and 3 years from now. And, you know, unless that new fire district was to go out for an operating levy in a decade, or whenever that new fire board decides that they're short on funds or needs a capital outlay project, that is the only time the rural taxpayer would pay more than that $2, and that would be voted on at that time. That concludes our basic information for tonight. My council contact information is on the city website, as well as we have a website set up just for consolidation efforts, and an email there. And then obviously if you get a phone call, I think they're going to phone call and text, or how are they going to do the polling? Phone call and what else? Yeah, so there will be polling going out later this month, and be sure to engage in that, even if it might not be at the most convenient time. Having your voice heard is very important to us as policymakers to make sure that we have the best information possible when we're going for that January 18th work session with the Budget Committee. And from there,
Would like to follow up with one point that we haven't had in slides. I want to make clear what if this moves forward and is placed on the ballot by the commissioners, what you'll see on the ballot. You'll see a petition for the creation of a new district with a $2 per thousand tax rate. If you live in the rural district, you'll see the petition, that same petition. You'll also see a resolution for the dissolution of the existing district and tax rate. So what that will do, that's for the rural district folks. They will vote on eliminating that current tax rate and that current taxing authority, and then the combined, the two areas will vote on creating the new taxing district. You also will see at the same ballot an election for board members should the new district be successful. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
to add on the chief's point, that new 5-member fire board will be at large throughout the whole district. So if you live in that big border that you saw on that, I think, second or third slide that he was talking about, if you live within that area, you're eligible to run for the fire board. We don't have anybody currently running or express interest in that. You'll be able to file for that once this ballot measure is actually slated for the ballot. So sometime in end of March, beginning of April, you'll be able to put your name in the hat to run for the fire board if that's of interest to you. Questions? Go ahead. Megan's going to bring you a mic here just so the recording, we have this streaming right now so they can hear you.
Thank you. When they hold the election, can the rural opt out and the city pass, or is it a either or all for one?
So for the new district to be formed, it has to pass in the rural district as well as the city voter has to pass it independently, and the rural voter has to pass their dissolution. If it passes for the new district in the city and the rural area, but the rural voter does not pass the dissolution, the new district is not formed. In the back.
Hello. Do you know what the current response times are and how you want to make them better, like by how many minutes?
Yeah, so our goal is to improve the first out engine response time, reduce it by up to 90 seconds. And the reason that's our first primary goal, the reason we within the city limits, we have our initial response times are running anywhere from 7.5. First out arriving units, when they're available, are running anywhere from 4 to 7.5 minutes, but they're delayed by 90 seconds if, well, we don't have 3 people on the engine. We only run 2 people on the engine right now, and we have to wait for an ambulance to be in service to cross-staff or supplement the engine staffing because our ambulances are firefighters and medics. So we have to wait for them to be available, wait for a volunteer to get in-house, and both of those take significant amount of time before we can get that engine out the door. So that's the first question. Our EMS response times when we're available in city limits, we have a 8 minute We have an 8-minute response requirement by our contract with the ASA with the county, and we meet that 90% of the time currently on calls that we are available for. On calls we're not available for, the 700 times a year, we do not meet the response time because we're not responding. They're coming from outside Sheridan or West Valley or Newburgh. Rural district response times for ambulances are 15 minutes and unlimited, based if you live in the frontier area. And we meet those 90% of the time we have a vehicle staffed in the station.
So to add some additional context to that for you, a recent fire down the road here about 4 blocks from the station, we had our first out engine on a medical call outside of town, and it took upwards of 20 minutes to get water on that fire because our medics were tied up. Our first out engine was out of pocket up on a medical call outside of town, and we're relying on additional resources to respond to that fire.
And follow up to the question that the young lady asked over there, what was the, I saw reference to a national standard, recommended standard, what is that?
The national standard is NFPA 1710 and 1720, and they've moved from, they still identify initial responding timeframes, but they've moved to the number of people that you can get onto the scene to effectively create an effective firefighting force. And those numbers, depending on the type of facility and the type of location and the nature of location, are modifying anywhere from 13 minutes to 17 minutes and anywhere from 12 to 17 personnel on scene within those times.
And to add on to that, actually, the number of personnel that Chief was just talking about, we don't even have that many on per day currently. So relying on volunteers to come in, we can get to those numbers a little bit higher, but it's difficult to get that response time number with the number of people that it takes for that response time standard.
80% of your activity at the fire department here in the city is medical, is that correct?
Roughly.
Right. Could you give us a list of equipment that you currently have and where they're stationed that perform the medical responses?
Yes. Currently, we have one ambulance stationed on Baker Creek, which is a 24-hour-a-day ambulance with 2 personnel. And we have 2 additional ambulances in the main fire station here. We are preparing to spool up a 4th 24-hour ambulance, probably another month, and we'll have that up and running 24 hours a day. That will currently be coming, we're still working on where that comes out of, but more than likely the main station, because we don't have anywhere else to put it right now.
And the population of the city in ratio to the equipment and men you have, how does that meet this national standard? Is it below?
We don't use population, like law enforcement uses population versus per officer. The fire doesn't do that. That's not a...
Well, the medical, how many medical responses do you have per year?
We run 9,000 calls a year. About 7,500 of those are EMS.
Based on the equipment that you currently have, sounds like it is understaffed, correct?
That's correct, yes.
That's what I was trying to get at. Okay.
Yep.
And the second question I have about that is, why would the rural fire department be allowed to give up their 90-cent tax and the city has to retain their $1.50?
So it's state law, and it's 2 different types of entities. The rural district, within the rural area, in the rural area, in the county areas, there cannot be 2 taxing districts taxing for the same thing. So the district has to dissolve in order to create the new taxing district to get to the $2. Within the city limits, the city has the ability to tax as a city municipality and do what they will with those funds, but as a fire district overlay of the city, that would be an additional tax above and beyond what the city's resources are used for.
Okay, the final question, you mentioned that in March you're going to have some meetings and discuss options for the use of the $1.50 that's in the current city budget. Will the electorate be allowed to vote on how they want it done?
So the meetings will actually be...
No, not a vote at a meeting, the total city.
I know. I just wanted to clarify so there's not any misinformation out there. The meetings start for the polling data on January 18th, likely to be continued with a work session at our January 24th meeting. And then if there's not a determination by then, we'll continue that to another work session at our February 14th meeting. And I would think by 3 meetings, we would have that wrapped up. All those meetings will have public comment opportunities, and then we'll have that message clear and precise by March 1st, so we can have that to you, the voters, to decide if that's something that you feel has value or not. But no, the $1.50, retaining that taxing authority, will not go to the voters.
So will the voters learn on May, the vote, what the $1.50 is going to be dedicated to?
You'll know
Will that
that.
be on the ballot as part of the resolution, the ballot question?
Will it be part of the ballot question? No. Will it be part of our messaging campaign, and will you know what it's going to be used for and when it's going to come back online, how long it's going to be paused for, how it's going to be phased back in over a number of years? Yes.
So the only thing that we as voters will see is by coming to the meetings or by reading it in the newspaper, per se?
We're going to do a massive information campaign that'll be
Okay.
far above just posting it out in the news register. We'll have firefighters knocking on doors. Todd, myself, and the chief are set up to speak at a number of nonprofits and community organizations throughout the next few months. I think January we have at least 1 meeting a month. Some weeks have more than that. So we're wanting to get this message out to anybody and everybody, and if you're involved in any service organizations or nonprofits, I'm happy to contact with you and come speak at your service groups.
I hope it's okay if I ask a couple questions. Was it McMinnville that pushed for the feasibility study? Who wanted to go for and pay for that study done by ESCI?
So we, the county chiefs got together back in 2018 and decided that it would be a good idea to institute a feasibility study and look at consolidating. So as a group, the 9 chiefs, 10 chiefs that were in pocket at the time showed interest in moving forward. 9 of them showed interest in moving forward. One did not. And then we took the lead role in coordinating with the RFP and the consultants to get them in here and manage the process as it went forward.
Who ultimately paid for it and how much did it cost?
It was a shared cost for those that were involved in the process. Ultimately, I think at the end of the day, the entire process, we ran multiple phases. We did the feasibility study, we did strategic planning process, we did several public meetings. I don't have the exact numbers, so I don't want to throw a number out there. But we based the split on population of the districts and the departments and the city. The city paid the majority.
How about a rough estimate on how much it cost? It was a three-month process.
It was a 4-year process.
4-year process.
Yeah, but there were several different layers in the process, and I just don't want to be misquoted. I mean, I don't want to give you a wrong number. It was over $50,000, but I honestly don't have the number off the top of my head. I apologize. If I have your name and number, I can get back to you and let you know.
Perfect, thank you. The 2 rural fire stations that are looking to be built, I think you mentioned that that was going to be a large bulk of the cost that this tax was going to be going to, that infrastructure.
That was a part of the cost.
Yeah, a large part for that. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, we didn't see any kind of map on where those substations were going to go.
Right.
I saw the map myself. They were both in the Dallas Fire Department area.
No,
No, that was
the
the
new
original
substations.
feasibility study that included all of the departments.
Okay.
That's not where we are as of now. That's been upgraded and updated since.
That was just the
This study-
recommendation.
This study did not, the updated study with these 2 departments coming together did not include a feasibility or a station identification study. We have one of those done for these areas already prior
Okay.
to the feasibility.
So we don't know where those substations are going to
The
go?
new district board would make the final decisions on where they go.
Okay, but ESCI did recommend where two new substations should go, right?
No, not as
No.
part of, not as part of this study, as part of a station study that was done in 2007-8.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw where Dallas is included. We all know Dallas is in Polk County. My curiosity is if the city paid for a study to be done, or McMinnville paid for the bulk of it, and new infrastructure is being built outside of Yamhill County, why is it in McMinnville's interest to build infrastructure outside of McMinnville?
So it's not, right now, out of the 9 districts that were involved originally in the original feasibility study, there are only 2 left involved in this process: the city of McMinnville and the McMinnville Rural District. Dallas, Southwest Polk, Sheridan, West Valley, all of the other districts have withdrawn from the process. We are only just these 2 departments right now.
Okay. Just one more question, if you don't mind. Looking at the numbers on some of the response times, McMinnville seemed to be doing rather well compared to some of the surrounding areas. I'm just curious, is it the city's ambulance and fire services getting tied up, having to go to these more rural locations to where and the response time is growing because they're having to go to more rural areas?
So we have been providing the service to the central core of Yamhill County, 450 square miles with our ambulance service since since we started providing ambulance service. So that has not changed. The call volume is going up across the county as a process. The city population is growing larger. Traditionally, we run about 400 calls per rural district, and we run about 7,500 calls inside the city limits.
Okay.
Get you next.
This is just kind of a general summary. It just sounds like everything always wants to get bigger, 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 more. Used to be handled with volunteers, and I know things evolve and you have to adapt, but I mean, hospitals diverting, you'll never have enough ambulances. Seems like you need to work on the problems instead of just requiring more to take care of all the problems. And substations, and why are these hospitals diverting? You know, solve that problem. You'll never have enough ambulances if you don't work on the problems that you guys are experiencing. You're talking about critical personnel shortages on some of these programs and providers that you're having, and yet you're asking for more for a fire inspector to go look for potential fire dangers. I don't know, it just seems like more. Everybody wants more. We're about taxed out. I think the fire department does do a good job, though. I don't know.
I'll elaborate on that a little bit for you, sir. Volunteer trends in the nation have been trending downwards for a number of years, actually a couple decades. They were trending down back when I was a volunteer in the early 2000s. The issue with not bringing on more staff is currently your firefighting force is your ambulance staff. If this fire district goes into place, you're going to add additional actual firefighters and have a full engine company that isn't reliant on that medic personnel cross-staffing so it can get out the door to put water on your fire when your house is on fire. So that's where you get that difference in response times, and that's where you move the needle on that service level, that you have dedicated fire suppression staff that aren't relying to swing over from a medic unit to put their turnouts on to fight fire for you like it is today.
And I do want to just make the point that we We rely heavily on our volunteers for our second out units, and we will continue to rely heavily on our volunteers and our responses. This is not an attempt to reduce the number of volunteers. We're continually seeking to increase our volunteer forces because they do provide good bang for the buck, and it is people giving back to their community. It's an important part of what we do. We want to continue to be able to provide those opportunities, and they would still be a part of our response protocols. This is not eliminating them. This is trying to get more out there initially, and we're still going to rely on them to help us with those larger incidents and major fires.
Yeah, as a follow-up to the medical, would you give us a description of a typical heart attack, which is one of the #1 medical responses, I understand, in most districts? How long it takes to get anywhere in the city currently with one of those qualified medical paramedics, I believe they're called. And then how often do you take people, statistically, to an hour's drive or greater to find an available hospital? That's simply based upon the pandemic and its recurring events, new versions coming out. How often do you have those 1 hour or 2 hours out of all your calls?
So I'll start with that question. Hang on to your first one question because I got part of it, but I can't remember everything.
Just give us a description of how you respond to a heart attack. Because the first hour in the heart attack is the critical part.
Correct. So our responses differ, but we're going to use heart attack. So if we have a cardiac arrest call that's an active cardiac arrest, we're going to send an ambulance, and we have an engine available, we're going to send an engine because of the number of people required on scene to handle those higher level advanced calls. And so that would continue to happen, and that's our initial response to those types of calls. So that would put at least 4 people on scene. If we have an echo level cardiac going on, sometimes we have off-duty chief officers or on-duty chief officers that are also responding to assist in the process because of the critical nature of the call. As far as times that we're outside of city limits or going out of town, we know for certain, and I don't have the number of times that we're going on divert right now because I don't have that. We're still working on that. But 400 to 500 times a year, we are taking calls from our hospital into Portland and out to other areas, and that's about a 3-hour, 3.5-hour turnaround for us to pick up the patient, get into Portland, get where we need to go, and then get back. So that 24-hour emergency response vehicle is now not available for that duration.
So how many
Hard number I have for you, but
how many paramedics do you have on any typical response for cardiac arrest? 1 or 2?
Well, the ambulances, well, it depends on the staffing model that we have. Each ambulance has a minimum of 1 paramedic and 1 EMT, and we have a paramedic on the, sometimes we have 2 paramedics on the ambulance, sometimes we have intermediate or advanced, but a minimum, there's 1 paramedic on the ambulance, and there's an ALS person on the engine.
Last question, totally changed. When was the last time you studied going to a private ambulance service for the county?
2009, we looked at going to a private ambulance service for the county, and it caused, in order for the fire department to remain sustainable, we would have had to increase our taxes by at least this much, if not more, in order to switch over to a private ambulance company.
But would that be more, would they have a more robust service? Was that what you saw in the proposals? Would they have better staff and larger staff and better responsive times?
At the time we were working the proposals, it would have been the same amount of resources we had available in town.
That they would, any private service would apply?
Right. That's correct.
Thanks.
If there's anybody out in the Zoom world that would like to ask a question, please raise your virtual hand so we can get you online.
Any other questions from the crowd here?
Once again, just a little more clarification on my previous questions. I understand why the fire department would want to be free of the city constraints, the competition for dollars. I guess the part that I need more clarification on is why should McMinnville have to lead the way in increasing this funding for the rural part of the county that has failed to fund themselves?
So the rural district and the city of McMinnville will both pay the same tax rate if this is successful. So the area that we currently service is paying 93 cents per thousand. The city of McMinnville is currently spending $1.50 as an average per year per thousand. Both entities, the city and the rural district, would come up to the $2 per thousand rate. So they would be paying the same amount on their assessed value as the citizens of McMinnville do. 40%. So if you have the $5.02, which is what it's currently charging, that we're currently doing and using, and if we go to the $5.02, which is currently the current city tax rate, if that stays the same and we create the new district, that would be an additional $2.
Sir, I'll wait for Tyler to finish with his questions, and then Megan will hand you the mic, and I'll address that question in more in depth for you.
I'd also like to know why the play on numbers? Why break it down to the $1.50 per thousand and the $2 per thousand? Why not just let everyone know the percentages? I mean, it's a 33% increase for city residents, and it's double for rural residents. I mean, when you say it a little different, it sounds a whole lot bigger than what we keep talking about, $1.50 per thousand and $2 per thousand.
Well, yes, if the city chooses not to levy any of that $1.50 indefinitely, then it would only be a 33% increase for the city taxpayer. But the city's been transparent about that. We know there's service levels that aren't where they need to be in different departments, and so we want to engage you, the citizens, on what we should do with that $1.50 and when we should bring it back online and how it can ease back into the tax rolls and not create undue burden on you, while still getting this new fire district up off the ground to move the needle on service levels from not only fire, but also public safety, public works, library, and everything else that the city functions with core services.
I just have this feeling, once again, I mean, we're paying $1.50 because we've all decided that we are willing to spend extra on our city services. The rural part of the county obviously has deemed that they want to pay less, so they pay 97 cents. If we're all going to up it to $2, I have a feeling like there's going to be some pushback from the rural community, and I'm just wondering why McMinnville is pushing the rural community into this.
So the $2 per thousand was derived off of polling proportionately from the rural voter and the city voter. What the rural voter gets for that $2 per thousand is 2 new substations underway within the first 5 years. If you went down to $1.80, you wouldn't get those. You might get some design. If you went down to $1.50, you wouldn't get anything.
Once again, I wonder why McMinnville needs the substations. Wouldn't it be the surrounding communities that need the substations?
No, so McMinnville needs the substations due to our geographic growth. And so right now, everything responds out of Station 1 right now, with the exception of Medic 12 off Baker Creek Road. So if you put a substation out on the southeast corner of the city by the airport, which is where the heat maps for call volume show, or you put one at the northwest sector of the town where we've had all the residential growth, you've now not only increase the service level for that city taxpayer, but you've also lowered the insurance rates and increased the service level for that rural voter out in those 2 areas of the current McMinnville Rural District.
So it brings up another important point. You brought up the lowering of the insurance rate for the rural population. We've all seen the rural population, to be frank, I mean, wealth has exploded in the rural parts of our county. Timber, wine, nuts. There's a lot of money. So by lowering their insurance rate, aren't we just in essence lining their pockets?
So we as a
Are we
city,
paying, as taxpayers, we're going to pay more so they can pay less?
we as a city do not set an insurance rate. That's done by the underwriter of whoever they choose for their insurance policy. I myself, living in the northeast section of town, which has one of the worst response rates for fire and medical service in the city currently, pay more for that part of my homeowner policy than somebody that lives in the downtown core.
But it does benefit them financially on the back of the taxpayer, right? By
Not
lowering
on the
the
back of the
insurance rate?
taxpayer, no,
No?
no.
Okay.
It is determined by the insurance industry. It is a risk factor in the underwriting process.
I understand that, and that's why I live in town 100 feet from a water access. But they chose to live in the rural part of the county where there wasn't infrastructure, and now everyone has to pay an increased tax rate so they can have the infrastructure.
If I could follow up on one of your questions about the station, one of the challenges we have with the existing station is it will not, we are full. So if we try and improve our services by increasing staffing, we don't have the ability to do that right now because we don't have the sleeping quarters or living quarters for the folks that are going to come into that station. So we need to find substation locations, not only for the purposes of improving our service levels, but also to be able to even have the capacity to improve our service levels.
Megan, could you get the gentleman in the back? We'll come back to you, sir.
I just represent as the community manager of a 82-part unit senior mobile home park. And so I'm looking at this from the standpoint of, I've got 100 people that are on fixed incomes, and all of a sudden we're going to get this $2 increase with only a potential lessening of that $1.50 for a certain amount of time. So I'm very interested in having somebody come out and talk to a group of the people that I'm representing here tonight so that they'll get a better understanding. Otherwise, you got a bunch of no votes for people who can't afford to get any kind of a tax increase.
Definitely understood, and I'd be more than happy to come out there with.
Great, I'll give you my card after we're done. But the other thing is please be aware that response time, especially from a medical perspective, is very important for us because we're 55 and older and the majority of our population is probably 70 and over. So we need it and we understand that, but we also have limitations to what we can afford. Now, is this based on property tax or is this based on personal property tax?
It's based on the assessed value of your home.
All right, because we don't own the land, we just own the home that's on top of it. And so, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Earlier, you addressed shortly, but I think it needs to be expounded upon, that currently, on your first out, engine or truck, day in, day out, it's a two-man crew. Is that correct? I have to tell you, I'm a retired firefighter, EMT, Boring Fire, Newburgh Fire, and we're approaching, what, 40,000 people now in the city limits of Mac? With the last census, 35?
Yeah.
I have to tell you, two-man crew, totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. Somebody has to put the first eyes on the fire or whatever the emergency is, and the engineer's the busiest guy on the truck, and he's trying to get water and equipment, and you have zero additional manpower until other help arrives. A city of this size with one station is an embarrassment. People don't realize how important it is that every minute counts. And not only every minute counts, but with the proper amount of people with the right credentials. And to rely on your outlying districts more and more. And when I was at Newburgh, I was at the main station running the ambulance, and countless times, we were called back to provide additional assistance. This isn't sustainable for life. If we don't get enough manpower, the right equipment, and the right amount of stations. I mean, Newburgh has 10,000 people less than we have, and they run 2 stations, soon to probably be 3, and they are fully staffed with officers, firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics. This is the goal that the people that live in this fine city need to achieve and try to get to. I'm in my 70s, and yeah, dollars count. But I got to tell you, I've been on a lot of codes, and I've been on big fires, and I've been on outhouse fires. You can't do it with the number of people that we have in our department. It's totally non-sustainable. And I think people need to realize engine crews should have 4. You should have 2 in the front and 2 riding backwards. Anything less than that, to me, is unacceptable.
While we're waiting for other questions, I did want to point that there's a sign-up sheet in the back, as well as some flyers that talk about this. So on your way out, if you have any groups you want us to speak to, be sure to sign up. You can also shoot me an email at adam.garvin@mcminnvilleoregon.gov, and I'd be happy to engage with you there as well. Other questions, sir? So So the issue with that is the sustainability of this new fire district and the staffing levels, the apparatus purchases, the substations that it's going to build is built as its own taxing entity. It's the fire department is leaving the city. So if you want to set the tax rate at $1.50 for the new fire district, we're going for fire service, we're going from $1.50 to $2. So I think where the disconnect is The buck and a half currently is this out of the city's 502 taxing authority that was established by Measure 5 back in the early 90s. What we're asking you, the voters, to do is establish a completely new taxing district for $2. And you're gonna have, Megan, could you give him the mic? I'm having a hard time hearing him. I have a plug left ear.
You're going to reduce the tax for 90% for 1,000 below the poverty level?
No, you're convoluting the city service fee.
No. In the
That's the
proposal,
response time. That 90-second was the response time. Improvement.
okay, well, then I misread what you had online, because I went to your fire page to read about what you were speaking about. But anyway, at the end of the day, kind of take the study, which you've taken, but don't go to the voters for so much money. That's a lot more than you probably need, and now the city's getting another $1.50 for the coffers. And I understand the city needs the money because they're underfunded. Is that correct? That's why we're getting the service fee?
Yeah, so city service fee is coming online January 1. The 90% reduction is related to the city service fee. That doesn't address anything with the $2 per thousand taxing authority. The city service fee, residential rates $13 per water meter, multifamily goes down 10% to $10.70, and I think it's like $1.30 or something like that for if you're on any sort of federal or state assistance, you're eligible for that reduced rate. Even if you're not online with the initial rollout, if you are on assistance and we miss you in that, you can go into Water and Light and get that reduced rate. No, this is a tax rate assessed at $2 per thousand.
For those in the audience, can you please use your mic? Thank you.
Yeah, so we have this recording on Zoom and for MCM to be rebroadcast, and so if you're not using the mic, everybody that's going to be watching at home in the weeks ahead aren't going to hear anything you asked.
I recently read where it takes 1,000 signatures from voters for city council to send something like this forward. But city council can skip that step by calling it an order of formation. Recently, that $13 fee was passed without going to taxpayers for a vote. Why does the city council keep seemingly want to sidestep the voters on these issues?
So the referendum that you're referring it to voters, for this fire district, we would have had to gather 3,400 signatures. The reason we went to the county commissioners for that is we wanted to spend more time doing this, engaging you, the citizens, talking about what our needs are and what we can do with that $1.50 that we're going to retain, than going out and knocking doors and trying to gather 3,400 signatures.
Isn't that engagement as well?
It is, but you don't engage as many people. It's just one-on-one.
I feel like you'd be gauging 3,400 people versus however many are here.
This is one meeting, Tyler.
Okay. Once again, the sidestepping question. How come the $13 fee didn't go to vote?
That's not required.
Okay.
Any other questions? You have another question, sir? Oh. All right. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out. As I said, don't hesitate to reach out to my council email. Happy to have the conversation and would like to get in front of any service groups or organizations you guys are a part of, no matter the size. Let's get the message out to everybody. Thank you for coming out.